Hey guys, welcome back to this channel. As we're coming to end with this series, we're going to demonstrate now on how to set up the Docker Compose with Flask and React RTK query. So now, without any further ado, let's begin. Alright, so to start with, let us set up our Docker Compose. So let's begin by setting up the version. So just for this demo, I'll be using the version 3.8. And then, let's set up our services. Alright, now for our services, we're going to start first with the database. So I'm going to name our services as MySql DB. All right. So from here, I'm going to set the image. And for our image, I'm going to name this as, or using the MySql latest. Okay, so we're going to use the latest MySql. And then we're going to set up the container name. And we're going to name this as MySql container. All right. Now, next to this one, we're going to set up the environment. Under the environment, we're going to set up the MySql root password. Okay. So for our root password, I'm going to name this as my root password. So any password will do, as long you can remember that. And next, we're going to set up the MySql database. As default, we'll be using the MyDB. And then, just to make it clear with the indentation, now on top root, all right. So from here, we're going to set the ports. Now, basically, just for this demo, I'll be using the default port, which is the 3306. That's for our local host, and from our Docker, we're going to set up or call also the 3306. Now, for our networks, I'm going to name this as netcon, and we're going to set this to restart always. All right. Now that we have set up our services, let's create now our networks by copying this one. All right. And then from here, let's set up the driver. Okay. For our driver, let's set this to reach. Okay. So basically, that's all we need for our database. So now let's compile this one by calling the Docker compose up. And let's wait. All right. So there you go. So let's scan the output here. So we need to find or check if the setup is correct. Like for instance, this database. So notice here, this was already created. Now to verify this one, I install a extension you can use this one. This is the database client JDBC. So this one has a lot of features. Um, okay, so not this one. It should be this one. Okay, just to verify. Okay, so just install this or any from the extension. As long you have this one. So take note, this one supports in MySql, Postgres, SQLite, Redis, and Elasticsearch. Now you can use this one for your example. Now to test if this works, head over to this corner here and select this database. Now they have already prepared the Postgres and this one, the NoSQL. Now for this one, okay, I'm going to delete this one. I'm going to create a new connection. Now actually you can use any apps, but if you prepare with the use of the VS Code extension, that also may do. So now, so from here, we have the user root as default, and I'm going to set up the database, which is the MyDB, and the password. Let's copy that from here, and then once done, click connect. Notice here, okay. Once you see this message here, this indicates that this connection is a success. Now to view that one, let's open this one. There you go. All right, so that's all we need for our testing. Okay, good. So now that we managed to complete our database, this time, let's work now with API, which is the Flask. So let's work on that. To work with API, I'm going to cancel this running code. All right, so one stop, we're going to work now with API. Before we proceed with our Docker Compose, let us extract first the requirements in our API. So if you recall, but first we need to open this terminal and let's head back to our environment. All right, so this is all we need. Since we installed everything from our environment, so what we're going to do now is to extract those installation from our app.py. Okay, so everything that runs from this code, we're going to send a copy by extracting these libraries. So let's begin by typing pip freeze, use the greater sign, and let's extract by calling the name of requirements dot txt. All right, so that's the requirements. So now what it does is everything from our installation will be stored in this file, which is the requirements.txt or txt. So let's start by pressing enter. All right. So notice here, it eventually create the requirements.txt or the text file. So click that one and you will see all these stuff that we installed earlier. Now, some of these libraries here are already within the Plus. So others like the SQL Alchemy, the Plus Alchemy, so including also this Plus Migrate. So this is also one of the requirements when doing the Docker Compose. All right, so once done, let's proceed now with our Docker Compose. Hey guys, welcome back. At this point here, we added the API. So let's work now with the API folder. To start with, let's create a Docker file by typing Docker file. From this point here, I'm going to paste the code line by line. To start with, I'm going to start with this code line. So for our starting point here, we're going to get the source from our Python, which is the 3.9 Slim as our compiler. Now, since I'm planning to work with or set up this one to virtual environment, very important to place this next code line. This environment Python buffered one, this is the setup for uh, if you're running with Docker, so this will avoid competing with the resources with the Docker. So what it does is it will going to print out automatically the result instead of depending on the usual Python when running virtual environment. So now that we have that, the next code line is we're going to set up the working directory. So since our working directory is API, so I'm going to use that also as our default. Now next, since I already mentioned that we're going to create a virtual environment, so let's create that by typing this code line. Now, to enable this virtual environment, I'm going to label this one as enable VENV. So usually this is the common term used in Windows. So since we're dealing with or using with Linux, I'm going to use the standardized for that. So take note, I set up the environment within this folder location. Now for that to work, I need to expose that or assign that to an environment path. And then within that path, let's copy the requirements. Now, if you recall, this is the requirements that we set up earlier. So this one. Okay, so all of this code here will be copied to our environment. Now we have two lines here that I want to execute. So the first one, we're going to run or execute our requirements. So this will install our requirement setup within these files here. So this is the first one. The second one, we're going to recommend this one for our MySql. So since we're using the latest database, so we're going to assign this one to interpret the password since that's common issues with MySQL database. Now that we're done on that part, the next thing we need to do now is to assign that, or should I say the runner. So take note, at the very beginning, this is a compiler. So we're going to set up our runner, and within that runner, we're going to assign the working directory, which is the one, is slash API slash, and then we're going to copy the compiler within that reference to our environment. So take note here, okay? So this two line here will copy this compiler to this, or do you say the setup for the compiler here will copy this reference to this environment. Okay, next. So same goes. We're going to re-enable our environment. This time, we're going to set the path again, like this one. This time, I'm going to copy all the files within our API directory. All right. And then from here, let's expose now our port, which is the 5000. All right. So that's all we need for our Docker file. Okay. So feel free to post this video and copy this code line. Now, since we're dealing with migration, we're going to make a twist in this code setup. Now, for our migration to work along with our Flash or the Python environment, so we're going to create a file that will interpret the reading or automatically execute the migration. So most of the time, we encounter some common errors when during running your plus and also running your the migration. So these are the common problems with using plus. So for that to work, let's create a new file within our directory. So for that file, okay, so within this API, let's create a new file here. And I'm going to name this as entry.sh. Now what it does is, since we're doing with going to make a third-party execution, because sometimes when you run that execution within here, this will run together along with the other services. So the problem is there's a delay when running a migration and the execution. Our purpose here, our entry point will serve as the second execution that will delay the process of, you can say, the waiting process for uh, previous services down to the current services, something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a script that will wait that execution to finish, then it will read our flash execution. So let's work on that. To run that point.sh, we need to label this comment. And for first execution, I'm going to set up the message. So for that message, I'm going to set that to our echo. So echo is the printing command. So from here, we're going to wait the database. Take note, this entry point.sh is the purpose is to delay the process or waiting the MySql to finish. Sometimes you may encounter that it will take time to load the MySql database. Now, for that to work, I'm going to set up a delay. So for the delay, I think the best setup is at least 20. Now you can adjust this delay accordingly. So just feel free to modify this number, because based from what I did is this one is the perfect timing for this waiting session. Okay, so after this delay or the sleep settings, I'm going to print out another message, and this time I'm going to set as echo as started. Now that we have this one, I'm going to run our first execution, which is this plus db upgrade. So this is where our plus we're going to takes place. This is where our table will be created. Now, if you recall earlier, we used this plus db upgrade to auto create the schema that we set up in our plus. Now next, once this is done, we're going to set up the auto run next to this line. So what it does is this will run our application, and by default we set up to our host, which is this IP address. All right, so that's all we need for our entry point. So let's save that. Then from here, head back to our Docker file. So the next thing we need to do now is to import that file. But first, we need to permission so that we can write anything within that file during execution. So I'm going to place that code next to this line here, which is down below. So from here, we're going to assign this permission for this entry point sh. Then, once done, we're going to execute that by typing next to this expose port, by typing this code, which is the entry point sh entry point dot sh. So this will execute the instruction or operation of that entry point. All right. So that's all we need for our Docker file. From here, we can test now our, or should I say, we're going to construct now our Docker Compose. So let's work on that. Before we proceed with Docker Compose, notice here, if you notice, not all files needed in Docker. Simply because, like this one, this environment. So this is from earlier example wherein we set up our environment. But since we don't need this anymore, because we already set up the virtual environment within this Docker file, so we can skip that. Now, aside from this one, if we have some other files, we can ignore that. So simply minimize the execution within the Docker file or the Docker environment. Now, to work on that, I'm going to create a new file within this API. And we're going to name that as .docker ignore. Okay? So what are the files we don't need within the Docker environment? Now, I'm going to paste this code line or the list. So these are the lists that we don't need anymore during execution. All right? So that's it, guys. So that's all we need for our Docker ignore. Now, from this point here, safe to say, when running a Docker file, we don't need to worry all those things that not necessarily needed during the process. So that's all for that. So now, safe to say, we can proceed now to Docker Compose. So let's head now to our Docker Compose. And from here, make sure you align within this range. So let's say I'm going to move with MySql a little bit. And then this one should be here. Okay, so from here, let's set up the services. I'm going to name this as API. All right. And then let's set up the build and the location, which is the /API, which is the API folder. Then for the container name, okay, so we're going to name this as API container. And then I'm going to add this stdin or the stdin, which is to open. And the tty. Okay, so this is only optional. You can skip this if you don't want to use this one. Another thing is we're going to need also these volumes. Okay, for our volumes, we want to specify the location path, then the location in the Docker environment. Now within here, let's export now or expose the ports. So basically, we're going to expose only these port to port 5000 from our Docker port, which is the 5000 as well. Next, we're going to call now the networks. So same goes, make sure we're going to, or it should be on the same network, which is the netcon. And then don't forget to set up the depends on. So still, even though we have the settings in the Docker, we still need to set this up. So I'm going to call the services MySql or MySql DB. So this is the name from this section here. Okay, so make sure we close this one. And then, so we need to specify the start. So only if, unless, stop. Okay, so let's save that. So see to it, you are aligned with everything from here. Okay, so that's all we need for our API. So feel free to post this video and copy this code. Then afterwards, okay. So I think much better to, since we already have our MySQL container. So if you're typing Docker PS, you will see that we have already set up the MySQL, so which is this one. So now, okay, so this one is already, oh, okay, so it's already auto executed. So I much prefer to delete or remove everything from this section. So simply because I want to clear everything so that we'll see the step-by-step recording process or the execution. So let's clear this up. And then let's delete all the containers, images, and all those stuff. So by calling this command, docker compose down hyphen rmi space all. So this will delete all the existing services. There you go. So right now, we already delete all those things from Docker services. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see from step-by-step execution running from, of course, the sequence is from MySQL down to our API. So take note, uh, from what we're going to do is we're going to witness the execution in creation of this Docker file and support with this entry point sh, which is this one. So later, we'll to explain everything once done. So let's run this now by typing docker post up, then hit enter. So this will take a while. So feel free to skip this line here. But I'm going to speed this up after these settings or after these ones. So I'm going to speed everything so that we can see the final process. On your part, you can simply wait this one to finish. All right. Right. So I guess that's all of it. So let's scan this now. So notice here the last part. This indicates that we reached the end services, which is the API container. Now, by checking so, notice here. So what are the things we need to check? So the first one is I'm going to look for the database creation. So make sure you see that in this line here. So, okay, here. There you go. So notice here, this one. So which means our database was already created. Now, from here, moving down below, see here, MySQL started. So this one here, so it already passed this section. So this one, MySQL here, MySQL started. So maybe we should look for this one, wait for MySQL. Because right now we saw this one. So need to find that. Where are you? Okay, let's move out here. See here? So from this range here down to this section here, see how long it will take the process of reading the MySQL. So that's why we set up this timeout, which is this sleep mode, sleep 20, because that's the only thing I noticed with MySQL. It will take time to load. So after or once finish, see the next step. We're going to find this one, the plus DB upgrade. This is already from here. Now see this code line here, running upgrade, and this code here, or this particular line. This indicates that the plus DB upgrade is already executed. Now to confirm that, head over to our database. See here? Okay. So right now, we don't see it here, but once we're going to refresh that, there you go. Okay. Notice this table here. So this indicates that our migration already working. And the last step, this one. So we're going to check that on the last part. That indicates this section here. So everything from here is working. Now to test this one, it works. Head over to your browser. Okay, so I'm going to delete this from my earlier example. There you go. So this is what I mean. I need to notice this one. This is the local host that we set up in the class, and this is the routes. If you recall our code in app.py, and this is where here. So this one. Okay. So now, since we don't have data, if you're going to refresh that, there's nothing to see in here. But this shows that everything is working since there's no error. And also, when we do some requests, you can see that it sends a request from this section here. All right. So that's the Docker setup for our API. Okay. Now that we're done with the API, on our next step, we're going to work now with our front end, which is the app. So let's proceed to that. All right. So before we work with API, make sure we minimize this one. Then let's cancel this execution by pressing Ctrl C. So make sure everything here is not running so that we can see the entire process if working. Okay. Next, I'm going to remove everything from our Docker by executing this line. All right. Okay, so that's all we need. So from here, so I'm going to minimize everything by closing this one as well so that we can only focus on app. So from here, pretty good. So we're done. So let's proceed now with app. All right, welcome back. So right now, I already added the app. So let's focus now on app by creating our first Docker file for this one. So within the app folder, let's create a new file. And I'm going to name this as Docker file. Okay, so don't be confused. We have already our Docker file from API. So right now, just focus on app. Now, from what we're doing from this started of the series, similar goes. There's no special for the setup. We can simply copy those format from the earlier example. So let's begin by calling the following. First, we need to call the node latest, and then I'm going to assign the working directory, which is the /app. Then from here, let's copy now the package.json to our Docker directory. Okay, so next, then once done, we're going to execute the run npm install. And finally, we're going to apply now the copy all. And then we're going to expose the port 3000 since this is the default in React. And the last one, which is the command or the CMD command, which is the npm start. All right. So basically, that's all we need for our profile. Now, notice here, I already added the Docker ignore. So make sure we have this one so that we can exempt all those things that won't needed during our Docker process. Now just copy this one or creating this Docker ignore and add this list to avoid or exempt during the creation. All right, so once done, we can proceed now with Docker Compose. Okay, so let's close this now. Okay, so let's align the next services. So next to our API, we're going to call now the app. Okay, so make sure everything is aligned. Okay, so from here, let's add it now the build and the local directory, which is the app, and the container name. We're going to name this as app container. And then let's add this stdin, which is open to true. So take note, this is only optional. So I just going to add this one since we already started that with our previous series. So also the TTY. And then we're going to expose now the ports. For our ports, we're going to expose the port 3000. Okay. And then let's set up now our volumes. And for our volumes, we're going to call the local directory, which is the app. And then we're going to map that to the parent app, which is from the Docker. Next, we're going to assign this also the app, except the app node modules. There you go. Okay, so basically that's all from our modules. Now, let's set now the depends on. Now, so basically we have two, which is the database, which is the MySql DB. That's the first one. And the second one is the API. So similar goes, we can copy this network. And the last one, we're going to set the start. So the only time we're going to execute that if on failure. There you go. So that's all we need. So basically, that's all we need for our app. So feel free to pause this video and copy each line. So once done, let's try now our execution. So a while ago, we deleted everything. So we ensure that no services were running. So let's start now by typing docker compose up. So let's see if everything is working by pressing enter. All right, so there's no error. So from here, let's wait this to finish. All right, so I guess we already at the last part. Okay, so I think we already made it on the last part, which is the app container. Now to test this one, head over to your browser, okay? And then let's create or open a new tab. So from here, let's open the localhost 3000. And there you go. So let's try this now by adding this title. So any text is okay. Oh, so there's still, okay, so there's an delay, something. Okay. So there's an issue here. So possible the creation of the MySQL is not enough. Notice here. So this one, it happened because the database or the table did not create successfully. See? Now to solve this issue, at first I need to cancel this one. Okay? So to fix this one, I'm going to increase the time within that uh, this API here. So under this entry point, so notice that 20 seconds is not enough. So better to increase this one. Let's say I'm going to increase this to 50. Okay. So this is something that you need to check if something like that. Usually, this only happens for any migration. If your Plus has a migration, so definitely, so this is the issues because of the delay. To fix that one, I'm increasing the waiting time, which is to 50. So now, what we're going to do now is to rebuild everything. So I'm still fan of deleting all, like this one. So although you can simply build only this section, which is the API, but I don't want to do that since we already have a lot of bunch of code here. There's another process here that you can simply build only that certain services without needing the uh, what do you call that? The without needing the reprocess everything. So by doing so, you can simply limit the process like this one. So let's say Docker Compose app Docker Compose build, and we specify the services, which is this API, this one. So this only picks the section of your API. So this will refresh everything. So whenever you have made some changes, let's say this empty point, so this belongs to API. So by calling only this small command, which is this one, Docker Compose build, this last section here is the name of the services, which is this one. Okay. So now that we already fixed that, so okay, so this only works for those services that has build. See the build here. API has the app. So that only works for that certain container or services. So now that we increase that, so let's clear this up. So this time, we'll see if the effect of increasing the sleep mode or the sleep waiting time takes effect. We need to, okay, want to refresh this one. Okay, so make sure we don't see those tables. Okay, so let's run now the Docker Compose up. So see here, so it will recreate the process. So that's how you update your container. So this time it will run back again. Hopefully, it will work as what we're going to expect, which is the migration of those files from our backend. Okay, so let's check this one. Okay, so not yet. So I guess we need to wait a little more. There you go. So notice here. So although 50 sleep 50 takes a longer time, if that's the only thing that we can fix the error, so that's okay. So you can adjust that. Okay, so notice here. Okay, this one. So this one here, it means that we already execute the migration. Now to check that one, let's refresh this one here. There you go. Okay, so notice here, the movies is already in the table. Now that we have that, so let's head back to our browser. First, we need to refresh this one. There you go. Now to test this one. So first, we need to refresh, and then let's add this form. Okay, so that works. Let's add one more. There you go. So let's try another, like editing this one. All right, so that works. And the last one, I want to delete this section here. There you go. So that's it, guys. At this point here, we managed to complete the CRUD operation using Flask as backend and React RTK query as frontend. Since we're on the last chapter of our Docker series, feel free to comment and subscribe as well. Hit the notification bell for any future video series. And as always, if you found this video informative, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And see you guys on the next video series. Cheers!